Hello and welcome back, and today I want to talk about this. This is the Terramaster F2-423. It's the 2-bay entry into their new 2022-2023 series of devices, and weirdly, although I've referenced it, I would say about 10 times on the channel in 2022, this is the very first time I'm actually showing it to you here on camera. Now, why is that? Why is it that I give the 4-bay of their portfolio so much attention? Well, I think most users these days, when it comes to making the jump away from cloud services, moving away from that little bit of free Google Drive or Dropbox they had knocking around onto their own private server, tend, particularly those of a business mind, to opt for something a little bigger, a little 4-bay there, maybe even a 6 or an 8. And although 3 or 4 years ago the vogue towards 2-bays was actually pretty darn high, now we're seeing more users take seriously things like redundancy, taking on board kind of the performance benefits of solutions that have multiple drives, and therefore, although 2-bays are still popular, the focus has certainly shifted in favour of larger devices there. And that was why I was really giving a lot of focus to the larger 4, 6 and even 9-bay solutions from Terramaster there. However, now towards the end of the year, thanks in part to improved network bandwidth appearing on devices externally, and because Terramaster have released an update of their TOS system, I've decided now is the perfect time to talk about this in a far more direct review fashion. Now, the first thing I want to talk about there on the box, let's get it straight out the way, is that external packaging. It is dull as heck. Look at it. It's this brown box design. It's something, normally when it comes to devices at this scale, we see something a little more of a home user persuasion. And I've got to say, I kind of preferred that kind of blue box packaging they had in the old day. There's one right there, just there in the background of it. But this packaging belies a larger point, and that is to do with value. Terramaster has always been the brand that is more heavily associated with bang for your buck, low price. They're always on offer on Black Friday, Prime down that, and therefore, although a lot of users jump onto the Terramaster bandwagon because they're trying to save a few bob, it should also be highlighted that they're having real difficulty, I think, shifting this kind of reputation of being the budget end of the market, and particularly when you see a lot of the hardware and indeed software innovations that they're coming up with, I think it's a reputation they could stand to maybe get shot of. Hopefully they don't raise the price in order to do it, but I think this 2-bay in the F2 is probably one of the most formidable hardware 2-bays for its price point in the market right now. It still has a couple of little features that their alternatives and their competitors have, but I would say those competitors that are providing those are doing so at between 1 and 200 nicker more for a 2-bay, but that's enough for that. Let's have a little look at this device. So, big old dull box there. Let's see what we get for our money. Again, if you've watched the 4-bay review, a lot of the things I'm going to talk about today you've probably already seen, but there should be a full detailed 2-bay review below. And also it's worth highlighting, although I'm not sure if that video has gone live yet, this device actually features in 2 of the best of the year categories here on the channel. So do check that out later on. But again, with this device knocking around, depending on where you are in the world, between about 350 and 380 nicker, again, tax, logistics, shipping, all that stuff included, what you're getting is not a bad little device, but let's get to that in a moment. There's our accessories here in the retail box. There is our device, again, hard foam packaging. I know a lot of you find it really, really dull, but I genuinely will always give that extra little mark to any brand that protects their stuff in transit, because these devices, they're coming overseas from Taiwan. They are subject, to quite a lot of pressure, movement damage, that sort of thing. And brands that don't go that extra mile and spend a few extra quid on that packaging, despite the fact they arrive unpopulated, again, a little extra mark from me. But that's all you get inside. We'll pop the device to one side and see what we get in our accessory kit. Inside we have our external PSU, a 60-watt PSU, and it is a 2-pin adapter one. Again, I've mentioned before, when it comes to PSUs, I will always prefer an external PSU where possible. I get it in some cases. When you get to the bulky 6, 8, 12-bay devices, you kind of reach that point where, watt rating means you've got to go internal, but when it comes to a system like this, I will always prefer an external PSU, simply because it's much easier to replace and it takes a lot of that heat out of the internal system, which is going to be on 24/7. Again, PSU there, 2-pin there on the front, you've got your mains cable included. You've also got, this is something I haven't seen from a lot of brands, by the way. I commented on this in another video. First, you have extra rubber washers for the trays, something a lot of brands could stand to include, given these devices are only held in place just very, very loosely. And secondly, additional rubberized feet for the device. Again, little things like that. Next, we have screws, and these are screws to a 2.5-inch media, and we have an Ethernet cable. Just the one cable, even though this is a 2-port, but again, tiny little extra mark, because they've gone, and I don't know how well this is going to come across on the camera, they have, to their credit, gone Cat 6, which again, given this is a 2.5G and not a 10G NAS, it's a little bit unnecessary, but again, good, high quality, very well coated Cat 6 cable there. Again, little tiny things. Next up, we have information on the warranty. This device has a 2-year warranty attached to it. Again, slightly less than I would have liked to see. And there's an installation guide there as well. And there's some more details on that warranty. And curiously, there is the thing for labeling your hard drive labels. I don't know why they keep including this. It's weird. None of us need it. I don't know who's using those. But still, nonetheless, decent enough little setup there. What would I have liked to have seen more of? I think I probably would have liked to have seen a couple of cables there, because I think some users, I know they want to avoid waste, but it's just a shame they giveth and taketh with those hands there with the Cat 6 for only one of them. But that's really it. So now we can have a little look. Again, nice hard foam there. And have a little look inside the packaging. And again, slightly elongated chassis there for this 2-bay. You can see it all along. Hopefully the light isn't going to react too much with this silver chassis. Again, I quite like the 2-bay design. I know something I've repeated here on the channel a few times. Terramaster and their design, I think, is a little bit dated compared to some of the other brands out there. But I actually quite like the 2-bay chassis. I think there's a good distribution of size there. Let's get the thumbnail sorted. Thank you very much for your patience. And overall, although it's a little thick there, and of course that is being utilised for that ventilation, I actually quite like the 2-bay chassis. The 4-bay, the 5-bay, I'm less keen on, but this one looks quite conventionally nice for a 2-bay device. And I will also state, if we move some bits out the way here, that once you compare it against some of the other 2-bay devices in the market, although it's a little wider, it's actually not too bad, particularly in terms of depth as well. It's largely identical in terms of depth compared with some of the other brands in the market there. So again, quite like the design, but before we go any further, why don't we talk a little bit more about the internal hardware of this device, and we will be digging into that later in the video. So this device arrives with those 2 SATA bays there, but the overall internal makeup is made up of an Intel Celeron-based processor. That is an N5105, a 2.0 GHz processor, quad core that can be burst up to 2.7 GHz, oh no, 2.9 GHz I should say there, with embedded graphics on board. So again, your Plex, your VMs, your surveillance, your 4K, sorted. Next, the system arrives with 4 gig of DDR4 memory that can be upgraded to 32 gig according to Terramaster if you use their modules. And although that CPU has an official support of up to 16 gig, they have verified and they confirmed with me that it will hit that 32 gig there, which is quite nice to see. But again, we will be doing further testing on that in a follow-up video soon, as well as the Plex testing, of course. So a decent amount of memory, a very good Celeron CPU off the bat. And I will also say, and we will talk about it later on, there are M2 NVMe slots inside this device that have multi-purpose support as well. So the base internal hardware that this system arrives with is pretty darn good. And in terms of a 2-bay, puts it very high, with only about 2 or 3 other NAS 2-bays in the market that can get anywhere close to that level of hardware inside. So the front of the system doesn't have any kind of LCD panel there. What you do have are the LEDs there on the front. Let's bring that a little closer there for you. Now, those two LED ports you can see there on the front, those, again, drive indications, network indications. They're quite low light, I will say this, if you can dim them if you choose. I kind of wish they were brighter, or at least on the bays. They're very hard to ascertain from a distance what to what. There is a network connection one there, but just the one. And of course there is the standard power, but there isn't too much information being garnered from those there. There isn't a front-mounted USB copy port there, which I'm kind of disappointed about, because I think a lot of you keen followers of the channel will know I'm always a sucker for a front-mounted USB copy button there, because I think it's a much more convenient save versus auto-save, if you'll forgive me a gaming reference, a way of knowing that your localized backups are in order there. But with regard to the trays, I will say the design has improved there in this newer generation. As mentioned, we have click and load trays there, so again, pop the drive inside, nice and easy. There's screw holes for 2.5-inch media all the way made through that tray. An installation, very straightforward, and there's even little rubberized panels at each corner. I don't know how well you can make that out. There's rubberized panels on there that do reduce a little bit of that whir and hum. Not much, but just a little bit. Bear in mind that even if this is a 2-bay device and it isn't going to be that noisy, if you use larger hard drives, which these days when it comes to a 2-bay, and given this supports 20 and 22 TB drives, you're probably going to be crossing that 10 TB barrier on your hard drives, where drives start to get noisier in of themselves due to the larger number of platters, the click hums and whirs of the actuator and the arms there making its way across, just generally having a higher RPM. If you have a little look inside, I don't know how well you're going to be able to make that out in that light. We've got those 2 SATA bays inside there, no loose cables, it is combined power and data there all the way through, and plenty of ventilation there on the inside. Again, showing you this in this light, it's going to be tricksy. But overall, nice clean setup there, not really anything to complain about. Direct kind of throughput there for that fan, so plenty of ventilation. And I will say, and we will notice this more later on when we get to the internal hardware, the CPU heatsink on this thing is massive. It's probably the biggest CPU heatsink I've seen in a 2-bay of this stature. Now, with regard to the ventilation, we have an enormous ventilation panel that built into the rear, into the base. But there is 0 ventilation there on the sides, indeed on the top, no ventilation there. It is a combination metal and plastic chassis all the way around. Again, that will impact the noise a tiny bit more than a traditionally almost exclusively plastic external chassis. But I'm not really going to critique it too much for that, because again, at this kind of stature, that noise becomes very relative to its scale there. Now, again, just before we start talking about the ports and connections, I do think it's worth talking about the software a little bit, TOS. We have done a full review of TOS 5 already, so if you want to get to grips and know a great deal more about it, you can check that out. There's also, perhaps at the time of recording, a new update for TOS 5.01 or 5.1 even, for them, that's improving things even further, with a number of those beta applications now going into full release. Things like Terraphotos have now been made full release, and with innovations in TOS 4 to TOS 5 that have brought in surveillance applications, that have brought in much better management of backups and synchronization and centralized backup there, and other improvements with regard to the security and responsiveness of the platform, and that isolation mode all being built in. All very, very good. I'm not going to say that TOS is as evolved as DSM for the Synology or QTS for the QNAP, but if what you're looking at is purchasing a NAS primarily for its hardware, with the software being a nice optional extra, then chances are it will ring a few bells for you. It is a great deal more intuitive than it was. You can run the system from the hard drives or the M2 NVMe slots, and the system is very, very configurable with very easy file sharing. It lacks some of the killer apps, and although it's, as mentioned, included that AI supported photo applications, surveillance applications there, a lot of the other services are either left to be third party supported, for things like containers in some cases, and some of the other third party apps. There are, synchronizing cloud sync applications from Terramaster, and if it's not coming under those two categories, there are still notable absences. So, for example, if you want to run virtual machines, you have to use the kind of Java-based virtual machine tool that's built in. If you want to synchronize with cloud, there is a first-party tool to do that, as well as backup and synchronization with other servers on the network or remotely, rsync, RTRR. But if you want to integrate with like SaaS and PaaS services, you know, Office 365, Google Workspace, then you're going to be a little bit more limited. Some of those more evolved and kind of cutting edge applications aren't really supported. And same goes with that surveillance tool. It feels very entry level compared to, say, Surveillance Station from Synology. It's a nice formative start, but I think TOS 5 has still got a little way to go before it can challenge those. And that's because it's the Terramaster brand. One, more of that money goes on hardware than software. And two, their product is just a lot more cost effective than those other bigger brands. They have less money to throw at it, and therefore the expectations need to be relative to that. So, moving away from the software there, let's talk about ports and connections. Now, I'm not overly keen on the fan on this device. It looks a little bit dated there. It's weird that it sticks out like this, but I can't remove it. You can remove the external chassis, something we're going to do in a bit. But I'm not overly keen on the fan on this. I'm not entirely certain how replaceable it is. It seems like inside it's a standard fan, so there will be quiet fans that you can get hold of. But still, it again is just a pinch noisier than some of the ones I've seen out. And I think a part of that is the fact that because it's external, that noise isn't really being tempered by the overall chassis. If we look at the ports and connections, we'll talk about things I like. So first and foremost, these two Ethernet ports here are 2.5 gigabit Ethernet. The system supports 2.5 GBE. Also, it supports link aggregation or port trunking to combine those two together. So that means each one of those ports will give you something like 250 to 279 megabytes per second. But you can combine them for well in excess of 5 to 550 megabytes per second with a supported lag switch. Remember, they are backwards compatible. You can't upgrade this to 10 gig, although I will say Terramaster does have a much more affordable Intel-powered 10 GBE 2-bay that's already been in the market for about a year and a half that you can check out there. Again, Intel-powered, 4 gig of memory, a decent little system there. Also, I will add their USB ports. These are USB 3.2 Gen 2, so 10 gigabits per second connectivity there, so 1,000 megs to play with a bunch of supported devices, not just your standard storage, you know, your USB storage up to 1,000 megs, thanks to M2 storage, or RAID enabled USB storage. On top of that, you can get hold of USB to 2.5G and 5G adapters from Terramaster that allow you to increase the network interfaces on this, as well as connect from your own client system via USB to 2.5 or 5G into those existing ports there, or with further ports there. Now, all this might be a bit moot because we are still talking about a 2-bay SATA system there, and therefore the amount of throughput and the saturation of that external connection is going to be negligible. I do think a couple of SATA enterprise hard drives can fully saturate these two, given that SATA enterprise hard drive, you're looking at 220 to 250 to 60 megabytes per second there. But if you're going to go higher than that, even with SATA SSDs, you're not going to be looking at higher than about 650 megabytes per second. So I think you're all right with just the two ports there. And if you were looking at a 10G equipped 2-bay, like the other 10 GBE system in this series, I believe the F2-423, but don't quote me on that. Again, full saturation of that 10G connection would be negligible. So I'm not going to criticise this for not having it. It would have been nice to have the upgrade option, but I get why it's not there. There is an HDMI port. It is HDMI 4K. It's an HDMI 2.0 port there, 4K at 60 frames per second. Unfortunately, Terramaster does not have any kind of KVM, keyboard, video, mouse setup that has a GUI, graphical user interface there. It can be utilised to access command line, and we have done videos in the past where we've installed true NAS on these systems, which would require a KVM setup at least initially. So it can be used, but it's just Terramaster have yet to release something like QNAP's HD Station or Acer Store's Portal app, which is a parallel graphical user interface that is accessible via the HDMI and then controllable with a remote control, a network remote control, or keyboard, video, mouse set up with those USB ports. So lots of Terramasters have this, and maybe one day Terramaster will unleash or launch an HDMI parallel application that can use that port, but till then that port is largely useless for the most part. Okay, here we are on the desktop of the F2 here, accessing via the web browser, and let's log straight in there. I've utilised an IP scanner in order to find this on my local area network, but I will highlight there is, of course, Terramaster's own TNAS application you can get for PC and Mac, as well as accessing it via your mobile device. Right now I'm using Edge, but of course it does support all of the usual browsers, as you might expect. And this is user interface here. Right now we're on 90% zoom. If we go to 100% zoom, this is kind of what you'll see. This is the full kind of area, and again I'm going to be really kind of brushing through the OS a little bit here because I have already done a full review of TOS 5.0, and on top of that there is the beta currently available for TOS 5.1 with the full release of TOS 5.1 presumably arriving, they say around about February time. I would err towards the end of February there. But let's talk navigation. At the top right here, you've got your user account there. And again, those user settings can change a lot of things. If you don't really like the picture of the dog there in the background, you can go into the desktop. There are other wallpapers. And it's all pretty quick to swap around there all the way through. You, the end user, you've got the usual access privileges there all the way through. You can enable two-step authentication if you choose, very, very easily there, along with remote access via the Terramaster cloud servers as well. And again, there's little things you can do, and there's security settings you might want to know about. That background, I've just realized, is terrible for being able to show you stuff on the screen. Let's go for something a little bit more neutral. There we go. It's still a little colourful there, but again, you can change the background, add your own custom ones on there. There's the alert panels on the side. There's the information tabs there that give you information about the system's resource utilization. On the right, you've got the alerts panel there if anything's coming up. And it's really that straightforward. Again, when you want to go back to this screen, just tap that icon at any point. But for now, we'll go to the control panel. The control panel on this, let's full screen it. It kind of gives you everything you would expect there. The icons are a little bit dated, I would say. They're not quite in keeping with the rest of the UI, but at the same time, with this user interface, it is upgraded in terms of the Linux kernel it's using and the socket utilization there in the browser. So it is very responsive. We are accessing it via the network, but of course you can establish remote access if you choose. Now, for those of you that are wondering about the security of the NAS, you've got the usual security settings there with different protocols, be it network protocol or remote access protocol, all adaptable, and the majority of which, including the admin account, disabled by default. But you can enable kind of auto blocking settings on here and different kinds of security protocol, with a lot of automated ones and pre-designated download certificates available off the bat. One thing that is notable, and I have talked about this in other videos, Terramaster is one of the only brands that has an isolation mode built in. And what that means is if you want at any moment, click this, and what it does is disable all remote access in its entirety, be it individual users or apps and services. It will also disable certain apps and services that are using different kinds of remote access protocol, APIs and PHP, particularly third-party apps as well. And it's a one-click system to basically sever all connection to your NAS. Now, you might be wondering, why can't I just disconnect the LAN cable out the back? Of course, you can do that. But at the same time, that might make a lot of programs not shut down safely. This shuts down most of those apps safely and severs the ones that can't. So again, it's all readily available there in the back end. Again, user account creation, very straightforward within there, creating users and user groups. We'll go through applications in just a moment. You can configure your network quite easily there, very, very quickly. All the stuff to do with bonding, LAN connections there, using USB dongles, adding a VPN. There are a series of different VPNs that are supported, or configuring your own third-party one. And of course, there are Docker applications that you can utilize within the Docker tools on this system in order to, configure the more bespoke network security profiles that you want to go with there. Media indexing, if you are going to be running a media server, if you go with Plex or MB, both of which are available on here, or utilizing the first-party applications, of which I would argue there are less on Terramaster than most other brands. You can set that all up quite easily here for it to automatically index as when you see fit. Again, in the storage area, We've already talked about this. The system does have support of T-RAID, a flexible RAID system that allows you to mix and match drives. Less useful in a 2-bay, it has to be said, but still, if you're going to use expansions or upgrade as you go, it's still quite useful. And of course, it does run on that BTRFS file system if you choose, but you can opt for ext4 if you like, and the option to create multiple volumes whenever you need to. And again, you can enable snapshots on these very quickly and easily with low hardware resource impact thanks to that BTRFS as well. Real-time information on individual drives along with smart testing and support of Seagate's Iron Wolf Health Management tool are available. One thing I don't really like, and I hope they do resolve this in TOS 5.1, whenever you reach a page that doesn't have appropriate fields, so for example I'm using WD drives and Seagate Iron Wolf Health Management is not available, I don't really like this box and no valid data. It's a little bit of a kind of a juddery feeling. I don't really like that. And I know quite a lot about network and storage tech, but there are other users out there that aren't so invested in it as me. And this will make you feel like the page hasn't loaded in appropriately, which is never a good feeling. But again, you've got support of external storage, hot spares, and their own hypercache option there if you want to use caching. Now, in terms of backup options and backup applications, there are a number available to you. The backup tool task here does allow you to create remote access backups over the internet, localized access backups over rsync, and again, all of these backups can be managed as differential backups, only backing up the changes after the initial large backup, or live synchronization, again, local network or synchronization to have your NAS and other storage areas synchronized together in real time. And again, you can go into different tools, such as using the centralized backup option, which allows you to create that widespread backup network between different client hardware devices. TerraSync server allowing you to synchronize your NAS and cloud areas. And again, that works in both directions. And all of these options, along with USB backups, which can be tailored in either direction. And again, differential, time managed, scheduled, etc. All of that built in. All of these options all built in by default with the system within the backup tab, and some of these you need to install individually. And of course, for you Mac users, multi-image Apple Time Machine backups already built in as well, and snapshots as discussed. Now, going through the options there, we can go into the App Center to look at the number of and the range of applications that are available and some of the standout apps. Again, I'm not going to go into tremendous detail simply because we've already done a massive review of TOS 5 that you can find on the channel, hopefully linked in the description, or you can look forward to my 5.1 review and overview, beta or not. But standalone applications, you've got a support of a lot more third-party apps than you might like. Such as Aomi Backupper. So again, you can use that to back up your client hardware device, your Windows machine, etc. on your phones, and back them up on an OS level to the NAS for restoration when needed. And again, that is supported by Windows formats. So if you do try and format a Windows machine and you've got Windows Startup Disk or a motherboard with Windows Startup drivers, you can point at the NAS over the local area network to restore your Windows OS image using a Terramaster NAS there, but you do need to use that third-party software. There are other standout application support now. Deduplication on the system is something I know a number of you are quite excited about, but again, it's not as efficient as a ZFS system. It does the job, but nowhere near as thoroughly or as efficiently as a ZFS system, because remember, you are still running, even with BTRFS, on a much more efficient system. Installing applications is very straightforward. Just click install. It's that straightforward. It will download the tool and install it. While it's doing that in the background, we can talk about some of the others. The multimedia server, for example. This is the one where, as mentioned earlier on, you can create your NAS to be a local repository for accessing your photos, your music, your media, of all kinds. All of it to be accessible on your Amazon Fire TV, your console, your smart TV, whatever, without having to worry too much about security protocol and stuff like that. Terraphotos was Terramaster introducing the idea of AI-supported photo recognition onto their platform, and that has allowed the system to synchronize it there, allows AI supported photo recognition of things and faces and more. And again, we are going to have a dedicated dedicated video on this application coming very, very soon. And again, it isn't presented, I would argue, as natively and as smoothly as the likes of QNAP's QMaggie and Synology's Synology Photos, but it does do the job. And again, we are talking about a very cost-effective machine by comparison to their competitors out there. And as soon as Terraphotos leaves beta, because I believe the beta period on this is going to be the better part of a year, as soon as Terraphotos is out of beta, maybe even in 5.1, that is when we will do our full dedicated review, because I think that's fairer. Then on top of that, you've got a lot of remote access server applications being built in all the time. You've also, if we go into the all area there, they have recently added a surveillance application to Terramaster. So that allows users to be able to add IP cameras to your local area network and access those cameras via a live feed. Again, nowhere near as detailed as what we've seen from Surveillance Station and QVR from Synology and QNAP, but it's still a decent enough application. But again, still in beta, so not really something we're going to cover in any extensive length. Now, going through these, you've probably seen some standout applications for you. The likes of Docker, as mentioned earlier on, to run those contained applications and services as you see fit. On top of that, lots of PHP database and distribution platforms as well, all running through. They don't have their own virtual machine tool, but there is support of VirtualBox, which is a fairly extensive tool, if a third-party one at that. On top of that, as we go through, the utilization of iSCSI Manager to create remotely and logically appearing storage LUNs via an iSCSI target, either remotely or via the local area network, is supported on its own dedicated tool. And of course, those third-party ones we mentioned earlier on, like MB and Plex Media Server and even iTunes Server, allowing you to create your NAS multimedia to be formed into a more accessible way that is native to that third-party client, making it a great deal easier to access. There are lots of tools and features available in the App Center. And again, if you do want to, you can access beta applications as they become available. And there is, although I'm not going to say an active homebrew scene, but there is certainly a third-party app scene out there that allows you to install third-party apps that you've created via TPK files onto the NAS. So you know, a reasonable range of applications and services with a cost-effective NAS, and the graphical user interface is easy to navigate. I think there are areas in which it could be improved upon, and I think most of those, at least as far as the graphical user experience go, I think there's a slight conflict in some of the logos and the overall design of what we're seeing here, but there have been giant improvements, such as, example, the security advisor you're seeing here that will periodically, if you choose, scan your NAS for areas of improvement, be it improvements of remote access and network security to simple password strength, enabling two-step authentication, auto-block. As you can see here, these are the recommendations. Security isolation mode, having that on a kind of periodic setting if you choose. Enabling an SSL certificate such as Let's Encrypt, enabling that firewall, having a snapshot routine and strengthening the password. It will scan the system to allow you to know where you need to make improvements over time. Now, remote access is predominantly handled by TNAS Online. This is when you want to access remote access to the NAS going via Terramaster's own servers there. But Terramaster was one of the brands alongside QNAP and Acerstore that were targeted by the Deadbolt ransomware group. So this is an area where I think Terramaster still need to win users over in terms of remote access security, and there's still a large body of users using Terramaster NAS that are continuing to use their systems offline only because of that. It's been a year and we have seen improvements in security and handling of that and the presentation of it in Terramaster NAS, with a lot of users probably been a little bit more informed by the brand about the nature of updates and necessity, but still nonetheless, Terramaster still do have to make ground for some users out there on that. And in terms of remote access, if you do have issues, you can arrange for Terramaster to be able to access your system remotely. And again, you do have to navigate that with them by reporting an issue. And then when it gets escalated, they will talk you through how to enable remote access, how long it can be accessed for, and creation of a remote access key to the system there. Again, useful stuff, but I'm not sure that is quite enough to win over some users. But overall, there's still plenty to do on this system. And remember, you can still access the system if you choose to natively in the web browser as breadcrumb, file folder access in a file explorer here. And again, you've got all the usual options to share files with the tailored rules of validity periods and passwords if you choose, as well as extracting, creating archives, copy paste, the usual sort of thing you would expect, with arguably, the slightly limited access to your files via the web browser there. But again, the larger the database you're going through, which you can see there, it might hang as it creates thumbnails. Something that maybe is my fault for not having that indexing enabled by default, as the system is enabling indexing there. Now, let's start taking this chassis apart. What we want to do is take a little sneaky look inside. The more astute of you will notice I'm using a different screwdriver because they no longer include the Terramaster screwdriver with this device, which I'm not going to criticise about, just bums me out a bit. Let's get the back of this chassis off and take a little look at the hardware layout of the inside of the F2-423. Okay, so the rear of this is held in place by 4 screws there on the rear. I've removed those, and then as we can see, if we remove that there, bring that round, that is the layout we have. As anticipated, it is a standard class I believe 12mm fan there on the rear, and there are our available ports and a nice clear interface for the ventilation there. So let's remove this from the chassis. Those of you that mentioned this on my other video, why don't I just disconnect the system fan there? The actual connector is a little bit finicky there to reach, so it's better to just bring the device through and leave the fan reattached, at least for this video. There is the external metal chassis there. Again, lovely clean work there, but again, fully metal, and that is going to impact those hums and whirs of the drives when they're active. So do bear that in mind in terms of noise generation. But if we have a little look at the system, again, we've got our 2 trays inside going directly into those SATA interfaces that I mentioned earlier on. I will also add, if we look at the base of the system, first and foremost, we have got 1 and 2 M2 NVMe slots there, and again, those are PCIe Gen 3 x 2, so 2000 megabytes per second possible with either one of those. There's also a sodium upgrade slot there for your memory, because the system arrives with 4 gig of memory inside, and that's where we add our additional one inside there. Those M2 NVMe slots, is worth also remembering, aren't just for caching. You can utilize them for SSD caching, read and write caching, but also you can use them for storage pools, so you can have specific applications and services booting from much faster SSD bays inside. You can put in just one if you like, put in 2, use one for caching and the other one for storage, take advantage of RAID groups. Again, it's nice to have those options in there to scale up that storage, effectively turning a 2-bay NAS into a 4-bay NAS there. Now, the other M2 NVMe slot, you might just be able to make it out, is just there. That is our other slot, and if we have a look inside, that's a Terramaster branded slot, and it's 2400 megahertz, 4 gig memory. So a little slower than I would have liked to have seen. But I will also highlight is you probably can't make it out unless I get the right just right. Do you see this large black metal kind of brush steel thing here? And you can't really make it out in any other way. That is the heatsink. It occupies almost the entirety of the main base bay of this system. My voice is resonating with that metal. It's really odd. So again, a tremendously large heatsink there that's working in conjunction with the main cooling of that system when it is in operation. It's surprisingly compact, this 2-bay, all the way through and through. And again, the main SATA connectors are connected here on that main board there, going in to that main controller board there at the bottom. Now, something I mentioned before in my videos about installing True NAS on their systems is this little thing here. There's a little USB dongle there. The TOS application for initialization is deployed using that, and that is what is used if you want to change OSs on this device. Now, changing the operating system on this device isn't really kind of officially supported. If you do that, then you're probably invalidating your support and warranty from the brand because you're using it in a way that it wasn't advertised for. But that aside, I will say that I've been running TrueNAS scale on a Terramaster 4-bay for the better part of 4 months to do some testing for another video, and it ran like an absolute charm. And I think an often overlooked benefit of going for brands that produce more affordable hardware solutions, and their software may not be as competitive as others, good but not fantastically mind-blowing. One of the benefits of those is for users that want to jump on to things like Unraid and jump onto things like TrueNAS Core and TrueNAS Scale, but they're a little bit intimidated about buying all the individual components, all from different warranty provided brand solutions, and then building their own solution. You know, that horrible feeling when you build your PC for the first time, put it all together, press the power button, and silently cross your fingers. I don't think anyone's built a PC from scratch and known it will work straight away. You 99% hope it will, but you don't 100% know. Lots of users, rather than build a PC like a PC and turning it into a TrueNAS, will look at NAS providers like Terramaster for their hardware, which is again designed as a 24/7 server, designed to be efficient, but rather than use their software, take the incredibly convenient method of getting a little USB, popping in TrueNAS, and then boom, you're buying Terramaster hardware, but running TrueNAS with its ZFS benefits. And this CPU and that memory can be utilized towards it, along with those M2 NVMe ports and along with those SATA ports there. So as I say, one of the reasons you can go for this Terramaster 2 NAS and 2-bay NAS, although not officially supported, and I'm sure they don't like me saying it, is because this hardware can be used very well as a nice, quick, easy entry point into the world of TrueNAS. TrueNAS, you can, get an IX system, but they still ain't cheap. This allows you to jump on TrueNAS for 200 to 300 NICA in some cases, or less even with the 10G solutions, and get it all ready to run in minutes. It's that good. But let's put this back together and summarize our review and what we like and what we might not. Overall, you'll be unsurprised to hear that I actually quite like the F2-423. It is by no means a NAS that is designed to blow your socks off, and it's really not going to. But when you do look at the specifications you're getting here, it's a good enough system for that money, and it's certainly the lowest price right now for that Intel Celeron N5000 series CPU. The ability to use M2 NVMe's as SSD cache, as well as storage pools, the ability to have access to BTRFS and snapshots, the ability to have 2.5 GBE, and the fact that you can upgrade it to TrueNAS as a compact little TrueNAS 2-bay with the ability to upgrade that memory pretty high, even though I still query that whole 32 gig line there. I'm really, really impressed by it right now. And although right now you can pick up similar Synologies in the DS720 and 723, with those scaling around about the late 400 to even close to 500 quid mark with the tax, and QNAPs out there for the same hardware architecture as this, knocking around for near 400 to 450 NICA, with this device including tax. Now still, even from their own website or Amazon themselves, at the 3 to 350 mark, makes it very, very good value, and certainly that lowest price point there. But just remember, you are paying more for the hardware than the software, and although there has clearly been development on that software, it doesn't match that of the big guys at Synology and QNAP. So just factor that into your anticipation for this device. And just remember, even with that flexible storage configuration there, even with support of like iSCSI LUN management there and other supported tools for synchronization and network access, the performance of this system, due to it not being quite as efficient with the R&D that goes into these systems from bigger brands, means the performance may well be a noticeable degree lower than what you've seen in terms of file transmission with some of the alternatives. But you cannot disagree with that price tag when you look at the rest of the market right now. And ultimately, that's why the F2 still gets a good vote of confidence from me, and why it's still in my top 2-bay NASs of the year in terms of that price point. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. The last segment of this video in my original recording, it broke, it corrupted, and I tried to edit it, but the frame rate dropped too much that I just wanted to re-record it here for you. The salient points are there, but that's why we've suddenly seen a change in the presentation and me wearing a different outfit. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. Have a fantastic week. There are links to other videos on this product along with the Plex test and best of the year content and comparisons. Link below and coming soon. Use the free advice section at NAS Compares and the free community forum Ask NAS Compares, and use the links in the description if you're going to go ahead and buy this device, as using those links results in anything you buy on those links, this NAS or anything else, resulting in a kickback coming to me and Eddie, the people that run NAS Compares here, and helps us continue doing what we do. But only do it if this video actually helped you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.